Hey guys, welcome back to Hobbies by Holly. This might be one of my favorite furniture flips yet, and it all started with a $30 find at Goodwill on a Saturday morning. There I was on a Saturday morning walking through Goodwill, and this serpentine front chest of drawers completely stopped me in my tracks, and it was only $30. Real mahogany, dovetail drawers. I knew I had to get it. There was definitely a lot of work that needed to be done with this, but I just could not turn it away with that beautiful serpentine front. Once I brought her home, I started researching about this Mahogany Association Incorporated label inside, and it was an official industry certification guaranteeing that all exposed parts and plywood were genuine mahogany. And back then, manufacturers could be legally held accountable for false claims. So this was a serious industry standard used in the mid-20th century to prevent cheap furniture from being falsely marketed as mahogany. And combine that with the dovetail drawers, this piece is solid traditional construction, probably from the 1930s to 1960s. So I removed the original hardware, and the very first thing I always do is give it a really thorough clean, and this one definitely needed it. I started with Cred Cutter to cut through any grease and grime, and then I gave her a full bath with Dawn dish soap and hot water. She was so dirty. Okay, so I just gave this a thorough clean. You saw how dirty it was. The water was so brown, it was gross. But it's very clean now. And I'm looking at the wood, and I just love this wood. It's mahogany. My goal is, if you come look up here, this is just very scratched up right now, but I'm going to try sanding a little spot, and we'll see if we can save the top. So then I can stain it, and then for the body, it just has so much damage. You can see here a lot of scratches, and look at the difference here where the hardware was covering it up versus the other side. So it's gorgeous wood. It's just very beat up, has a lot of damage. So down here on the bottom, right here on this side, it's missing a little piece, which we have them on this side. So I need to find something. It's almost like a little Scrabble square size, something that goes right there, because then it will catch the bottom of this drawer. A lot of damage here, pieces, but gosh, it makes you wonder where all this has been over the years. Last thing is this side, the dovetail drawer is kind of coming loose, but this is just a matter of gluing. I just need to glue this, and then I have one of these clamps that once I glue it, I will just put this on and clamp it on, and that will hold it in place and hopefully dry overnight, and then it will be set. And now for the fun part, the top. I was determined to keep this beautiful mahogany wood intact, so I got to work using my stripper. And mahogany has this incredibly warm reddish brown grain, and it just glows when it's finished correctly. So rather than painting over it, I wanted to strip it and see if we could preserve what was underneath. So I applied a really generous coat of stripper. And this time I tried something new. I covered the whole top with saran wrap after applying. I had read that this helps prevent the stripper from drying out too quickly, and it gives it more time to penetrate and do its work. So I let it sit for about 30 minutes before going in with a putty knife. The saran wrap method worked pretty well. I could see the finish had really loosened up nicely, but the putty knife just wasn't cutting it, so it was time to go to my carbide scraper. And this is always where the real work happens. So I started scraping, and once I felt like I'd gotten enough of the old finish off, I wiped it off thoroughly with mineral spirits. I also preserved the top drawer and went through the same process with the stripper and carbide scraper. While those were drying, I got to work on the body. There was another area needing to be glued and clamped down that was loose. And then I looked for any areas that I could cover up with Bondo. I tried to do this initially, but I know that after my first coat of primer, I'm always able to see a lot more dings and dents because that really helps to reveal them once the first coat of primer has been added. Once the Bondo dried, I got out my orbital sander and I used my sanding sponge for these curved edges, and using a 120 grit, I sanded back all of the Bondo to give it a nice smooth finish. Since I was planning on painting these drawer fronts, all I needed to do was rough them up enough to make sure that the paint would adhere. One last step before priming is I tape off the drawers and add little screws into the hardware holes to prevent paint from coming through, and also so I can pull them out easily after painting. I covered up the top drawer with brown paper to ensure that it did not get any paint on it, and then covered the top with saran wrap. I definitely wanted to protect that beautiful mahogany. For primer, I always use Ben Shellac primer, and this is hands down the best primer for blocking tannins, and I use it on every single piece. And sure enough, after that first coat of primer, I could see tannins coming through in a few spots. In between coats of primer, you always want to sand with a 220 grit to ensure that smooth finish. And I also could see more spots that were needing Bondo, so I got out my Bondo glazing putty and applied to all the areas that were needing some attention. Once that dried and I had resanded, it was time for the second coat of Ben Shellac primer. The key to applying Ben Shellac with the sprayer is as soon as you're done, you need to run denatured alcohol through it to clean it out immediately. And that will help flush it out, and then you can continue to use your sprayer going forward. I did some drawer touch-ups, and then afterwards I noticed some areas that were still needing additional Bondo and primer. So this time around, I just used my spray can of Ben Shellac primer to spot prime those areas. This is such a handy tool because you don't always need to reprime an entire piece, just those areas needing it. And finally, after all that prep work, she was ready for paint, and I went with Rosemary by Sherwin-Williams. And I just love this color. I've never used it before, but I thought it would look stunning with the mahogany. I use Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane Trim Enamel, and it's currently my absolute favorite because it's very durable for furniture and it levels out so beautifully, so you get that incredibly smooth finish. And it doesn't require a top coat. After spraying, I pull out the drawers and do any little touch-ups that I couldn't reach with the sprayer. And then I lightly sand using a 320 grit. You only want to do this between the first and second coat, not on the last coat. And then it was time for her second coat, and I let her dry fully before moving on to the top and front drawer. After the second coat completely dried, I removed the saran wrap and brown paper covering from the top drawer. I noticed a few areas that were needing touch-ups, so got out my paintbrush and did those little areas. And here was the moment I was the most excited about. I have to admit I was a little anxious. I had never done this before, but I'd done some research, and what I decided to do to preserve the original mahogany was to wipe on polyacrylic oil-based finish. A really beautiful way to finish mahogany. It penetrates the wood and then helps to enhance the natural grain rather than sitting on top like a regular poly would. The application's really simple. You just wipe it on with a clean foam brush and let it penetrate, and then wipe off any excess. I applied my first coat and let it dry for 3 hours, then came back and added a second coat. And this result honestly took my breath away. That mahogany just came completely alive. Next up was the hardware, and I'm guessing these have had about 70 or 80 years of use, so they were very dirty and tarnished. So this is an old pot that I found at Goodwill. You definitely don't want to use your own pots and pans to do something like this. And the goal is to get these cleaned up. I would love to just not even have to spray paint them or anything. I'm hoping that I can just get them polished up and looking great. I feel like I can see some of the original brass coming through as these are getting hotter, so that's promising. We'll see how it goes. All right, I've been letting it simmer a little bit here. Oh, you can see it's kind of a green almost, so the key is to simmer, not completely boil, which it's starting to kind of do. So I'm gonna turn it down a little bit here. But the key is to let it simmer as much as I can. After they had been simmering in baking soda, I removed them and got out my steel wool to try to polish them up a bit more, but didn't feel like that was quite doing the trick. So then my next step was Barkeeper's Friend, and this is always good for metal surfaces, but that still wasn't quite doing the trick. So my next step was I picked up some Brasso, and this is specifically designed for polishing brass and metal hardware. And after patiently working through all of these, it isn't exactly bright and shiny, but I really don't want it to be. It has that beautiful aged patina that tells the story of this piece. With the hardware cleaned and ready, it was time to put her back together again. I gave all the drawers a final clean using some water and then also acetone to clean up any overspray, as well as I like to use beeswax to help give the wood a little bit richer look, and it also has a nice smell. And I didn't want to forget about that bottom drawer needing a catch piece to help it close properly. And I realized that a paint stir stick was almost exactly the right thickness for what I was needing. So I cut off the end of the stick and glued it right into place. I added back the hardware, and finally it's the time that I had been working toward, the reveal. So let me show you where we started. Here she is. The day that I picked her up at Goodwill, very dirty, $30, very scratched. And here's where we are today. Rosemary by Sherwin-Williams, emerald urethane on the body. The original genuine mahogany, preserved and finished with wipe-on polyacrylic on the top and front drawer. Its original hardware, cleaned and restored. Dovetail drawers and the genuine mahogany from the mid-20th century. I'm really proud of this one, and I think it might just be one of my most favorite furniture flips yet. And that's saying something after everything I've been working on. This combination of the history, the mahogany preservation, the rosemary green, and all the creative problem solving along the way just makes it feel really special to me. If you enjoyed this transformation, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for new videos every week. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.